Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sade.
All right, so our client is Lapolis. Our client is here right with us today. Her name is Nani Corton. Nani is the creator of Lapolis. Lapolis is an organization that's about everything wellness, as she explained a little earlier in her introduction. So wellness in mental wellness and physical wellness and wellness in your household. So that's where her online uncluttering program comes in. I'll go a little bit over that in the next slide. But that's her picture there with her son, Kumi. And so Nani, again, as I said, she's the creator of Lapolis. She's a wife, she's a mother, and she's also a full-time employee at a company, and she's pregnant as well. So she wears a lot of hats. Next slide. So the Unclutter Your Space program that Nani runs is basically, it kind of speaks for itself. It's literally uncluttering your space. So she kind of gives a step-by-step directions to her clients, how to organize your household, especially mothers with young children, you know, toys running around. So these are just pictures of her own home, just to kind of show how her program works. Next slide. So these are screenshots of her website to kind of give you an idea of the look and feel of Lapolis. So as soon as you get on the website, there'll be an introductory video of her speaking. She'll talk a little bit about herself. So it's very personable, and she talks a little bit about Lapolis and the uncluttering program. And on the other side, if you can see it, is a screenshot of her blog, as she spoke about as well earlier. And those are just some of the recent topics that she had. Slide, please. So our project description and objectives. The main goal, the main objective was to create a marketing plan that outlined recommendations towards her goals of branding Lapolis, as well as increasing online exposure, and monetization strategies, which my team members will go over a little bit more. So now, next slide, please. And then the project deliverables. So we had, I would say, two major project deliverables. So Nani had a physical an uncluttering workshop about 2 months ago over the summer, and we provided a list of recommendations for her in a way to leverage that workshop and really gain benefits of it from the people that attended. And then the end goal is to provide a marketing plan to support her online uncluttering program. Next slide. So now I hand it over to Haja, who will talk about our methodology and tools used. She will go over the questionnaire that she had and the competitive analysis.
Good morning once again, everyone. My name is Haja. I'm going to discuss the methodology and tools used. The goal of our project is to increase online exposure. So I decided the best way to do that is to give Lapolis some exposure. So I rounded up a few of the client's target market, which were a few of my friends and associates. And by target market, I mean women ages 30 and above who have or don't have careers and who have families. So I sent them the Lapolis link with a short questionnaire to get their honest opinion on what they thought of the blog. The overall response was very positive, but based on the questionnaire responses, here was what the people had to say. Next slide. Next slide after that. Okay. 13% of the respondents said that they liked Lapolis and that they were ready to follow the Lapolis blog. 19% said that the blog was very well put together and they had a lot of interesting blog topics. One such respondent suggested a YouTube page or video log. On the other hand, another 13% found typos and they believed that the blog needed some editing or reformatting. And one of those respondents suggested that with the decluttering program, that portion of the blog, that a before and after picture of decluttering results would be helpful. Finally, 36% of the respondents had little to no interest in blogs or they had little time, or they said they couldn't relate to any of the blog topics. Next slide. Okay, and now competitive analysis. When it came to competitive analysis, I found that there were several blogs out there with very similar subject matter, I'm sorry. However, there were two in particular that stood out the most to me. One of those was minimalist.com and another site called wellnessmama.com. Both bloggers describe practical ways to improve and simplify your life, all while managing a busy schedule and a busy household. They suggest things like decluttering, to literally downsizing your home in order to make way for mental clarity. Wellness Mama discuss feeding your families clean, natural foods, using natural beauty products, and also using natural home remedies, all in an effort to improve our overall health and wellness. So that concludes my portion. So I'll pass it back to Priscilla, who will discuss social media and online exposure.
Thanks, Haja. So one of the other, we can stay on this slide, thanks. So one of the other solutions and delivery we had was social media and online exposure. So it was in two parts: recommended platforms for Nani, and with social media platforms obviously come followers, so also a follower growth strategy. The recommended platforms that we have for her, we only selected two because right now it's just one person and we don't want to overwhelm our human resources. So we recommended Facebook, which Lapolis is already present on, which is great. So we definitely encourage her to continue doing that. And another thing that we suggest her doing is implementing the live video that Facebook has. Since very recent, it's becoming a bigger trend, and we really believe in following social media trends because that really helps in leveraging company growth and brand management. And also Facebook, I just recently saw that they started doing TV commercials for live video, so it seems like it's really a growing trend. And with Nani on her blog talking about some of her personal household things of uncluttering, we thought that it'd be good to also add a visual by adding the video. And then the second platform that we recommended was YouTube, where she will then host her videos, because a lot of her recommendations are do-it-yourself, and it will help to have visuals such as videos where people can subscribe to. And then our follower growth strategy included a social media contest every now and then. Doesn't have to be anything big. I put in brackets WooBox. You can't really see it on the screen, but it's something that I've personally used. It's a social media contest, which is pretty cheap, and it's very effective in reaching and engaging with followers on social media. And then the other thing is to follow and engage with your network. So people who are already interested in wellness, to follow them as well and engage with them as well. So you're kind of going out there to then bring them in instead of kind of just staying put and hoping that they will come to you. And then this one is pretty simple, just posting visual content consistently. It's simple, but it's effective. People tend to follow pages that have consistent visual content. If they see a page and there hasn't been content for weeks, they won't really see the need in following. So that's also one of the strong recommendations that we have. They'll be more detailed in the marketing plan. Next slide, please. So now I will give it over to Sade, who will talk about our monetization strategy.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome. So at this stage, we've actually set up the blog to be as appealing as possible. This was the job of Haja. We've also been able to drive a lot of traffic to that blog. That was Priscilla's job. So now the question becomes, how do we make money from these visitors? If you recall, our target group for this project were actually mothers, particularly mothers of young children. And one of the main characteristics of these target group is that they are busy. So any monetization strategy that we employ has to take this into consideration. As a result, I have actually come up with the following 4 monetization strategies. The first one, ebooks. Now, ebooks are you could say they're like more in-depth than your typical blog article. They're like, you could say 2 to 3 blogs combined. But basically they target a specific area, which helps because Nani is in wellness. And so she actually speaks on different aspects of wellness: mental wellness, spiritual wellness, psychological wellness, just wellness. So you can actually create ebooks. And the good thing about ebooks is that they are portable. They can be on your phones, your devices. So busy moms don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, did I bring that book? Usually your phones are with you. You can access it from any computer, and you can actually price them at a very, very low price point, like $7. And they also provide a nice way for people to actually try her out without a huge investment. $7 is usually affordable for most people, wouldn't you say? All right, so the next one, online courses. Now, online courses are more in-depth than your ebook. And the good thing about online courses is that, again, they're accessible, so they're portable, and they can actually go even more in-depth. So you can have an online course that range from probably, you could price them at, let's say, $37, $67, or $97, depending on how in-depth you want it to be. Again, it's a step up from ebooks, and it allows people to actually get to know more about a specific topic area. The next one we have are membership sites. Now, membership sites is by far my preferred model, preferably because of the kind of income you're going to generate, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, a membership site can actually be structured to actually have content that are PDFs, videos, or any combination thereof. You can actually have two types of membership sites. You can have what we call a fixed-term membership site, meaning that it is for a fixed period of time, let's say 3 months, right? So you deliver the content, and the good thing about membership sites is that people can actually get a whole lot of community support and encouragement. So it's not just content that has its appeal with membership sites. The ongoing support and community is what a lot of mothers love and actually crave, right? So now, how you structure your membership site varies. You can, again, like I said, you can have a fixed-term membership site, but you can also have what we call an ongoing membership site, where, in this case, our clients can actually release new content every month, right? And members pay you on an ongoing basis. Many of us are already actually taking advantage of membership sites in different ways. Many a times, like for example, Netflix. We all pay a subscription model. That is actually a membership site, but it depends on how you want to structure it. So they're actually everywhere. Anything that you pay on an ongoing basis is actually a membership model, right? So then one way you can structure it is, for example, you can have webinars where Nanny can actually go on live video, maybe once a month or maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on how often she wants to do this, and give this content only for members. And she can actually decide to have what we call guest speakers to be featured on these webinars. Again, only accessible to members. Now, remember we said that moms are busy, right? So thing about the live video is that not everybody will be able to make it live. One way around this is that she can actually ask the members to submit their questions ahead of time, right? Ahead of the webinar she's about to do. Then she can answer the questions on the webinar and then put the recordings in the members area so that moms have the convenience of being able to go in at their leisure. They've asked their questions ahead of time, and they can always go into and get the recordings and actually listen to that. So you can actually now, if I just want to give an idea of how lucrative it can be. Let's say Nanny wants to charge each member $10. Actually, $9.99, right? That's the way it goes these days, right? $9.99. And let's say you have like 100 people. That's $1,000 a month. And we don't forget, we're bringing a lot of visitors. So let's just say it's 500 people. 500 people at $10 a month, that's $5,000 a month, simply by having 1 or 2 webinars. I mean, and the sky's the limit. And the reason I say this is the preferred method is that our client actually would love to, that's one of the things she shared with us, replace her income. And she's coming from an executive position, and that's a lot. So a membership site is very, very feasible, especially with the ongoing model, where you have income coming in month after month guaranteed. All right? So then the last monetization strategy is podcasting. Now, podcasting is very, very popular these days. In fact, cars are produced with podcasting abilities in them. The thing I love about podcasting is that it's accessible from your car. A lot of moms have told me that once they enter the house, that's the piece, it becomes crazy. Sometimes a mother can get some rest for herself or time for herself when she's in her car. When she's driving in her car. So, you want to be able to access that. iTunes is huge, especially if you are new. They actually have a way to promote new and what they call new and noteworthy podcasts. Now, the way you make money from podcasting is actually twofold. one, anybody who subscribes to your podcast, we can agree that they are actually fans of you. For them to subscribe, they are fans. And the good news about podcasting is that you actually get an alert anytime the person you subscribe to releases a new content. So you know that they're always going to be notified that you have new content. So you can always let them know about your new ebook that is out, your online course that is out, or even your membership site. These are your fans. Another way you can make money from podcasting is through advertising. You can actually agree to have to show some, play some adverts in between segments on your podcast. As a matter of fact, if your podcast becomes very, very popular, advertisers will actually be the ones to contact you. Okay? Next slide, please. So I'm going to move into the challenges and experiences and reflections that we came across. The first one being miscommunication due to change of focus. This is actually very interesting because usually the client knows, well, we would like to say they know what they want, but sometimes upon questioning, especially from that first initial meeting, if you know the right questions to ask, you could actually find that, yes, the client wants this, but after questioning, they actually really want that. So the good news was that at least we were able to nip that in the bud early. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge was getting the feedback. If you remember, Haja said she had to send out some questionnaires, and these are busy moms we're talking about, right? So a lot of times, many of them didn't have the time to get back to the questionnaire, or she had to follow up with them a couple of times in order to get the feedback. So that was one of the challenges that we had. And the last challenge that we had was scheduling this among ourselves as team members, because we all have different schedules, and it was sometimes hard to actually agree on a time that would work for all of us. Okay, next slide, please. Conclusions and lessons learned. All right, we talked a lot about scope of work, even from other presenters, and for us, again, just to reiterate, sometimes the scope is more than the client envisioned. Many times the client knows what they want delivered, but they don't realize that in order to deliver that, it's going to create, we need to solve other problems that are underlying that. And so it's always good for our team, we learned that it's always good to make that allowance. And if you know the right questions to ask, by the time you're actually having your first meeting, you should be able, and don't be afraid to ask questions. One of the things that I've learned, because it's the questioning that we had at the initial outset that helped us understand that the scope was actually a little bit more than our client had initially let us know. Okay, so the second lesson that we learned as a team, we need to always, at the start of every project, every team member needs to sit down and actually communicate our schedules, not just when we can meet, but also our scheduling preferences. I mean, we are three of us, but I can tell you, and I'm not going to tell you which one. One of us love to, meet in person. It's a matter of fact, it's almost as if, no learning really happened except we actually met in person. Another one of us preferred, why drive all the way when I could just pick up the phone 30 minutes and we're done? We're all busy, right? Just to give you an idea. So if we had actually all sat down and discussed this ahead of time, I think we would have reduced some of the frustrations that we felt even as we tried to set times to collaborate as a team. Okay, and the last lesson learned, we need to, of course, I guess it's common sense, we need to allow for delays that might occur just from things that come up unexpectedly. Like I could say within the 4 months, sometimes somebody was sick, somebody had to travel, sometimes things just came up unexpectedly. So sometimes, we plan as human beings, we tend to plan for a best case scenario, but in projects, you have to just give that leeway that things can actually occur, okay? So we've come to the end of our presentation. At this stage, I'd like to just open it up for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I don't have any specific questions right now. I'm just sort of taking it all in, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. I enjoyed meeting with you guys. I enjoyed speaking with you guys. And thank you for those that could make it for the workshop. I really appreciated that you could be there and you could sort of experience a piece of Lapolis or where Lapolis is going. So I appreciate that, and I hope it seemed like everyone that came took something away, and I hope that's the case. And you may not want to, but I'll be in communication. Just for a little bit. Yeah, I'm just taking it all in now, just to get just a little bit more clarity, and also so that you guys would know what I'm doing with the information. So I'm just gonna take it all in, absorb it, and share the potential results with you guys. So, thanks.
Okay, I want to thank the team so much for all your efforts. You have one more question? Okay, sorry.
Thank you. When you mentioned the ways to garner revenue, and you mentioned the podcast, talking about how vehicles nowadays have the ability to have podcasts, I couldn't help but think of audiobooks. Have you guys thought about maybe a series of health, wellness-based podcasts in a series, and installing the format of like an audiobook, one consistent series? It just kind of came to mind. I was wondering what your thought process behind that was.
They actually fall under the same concept. An audiobook, when you subscribe to things that can, when you say ebook, I guess the assumption is it's going to be written, but it can actually also be, like you said, an audiobook. Again, it depends on which is more easy for our clients to produce. She can produce either or. But bottom line is that you want to get the information on electronic format. So whether that format is something they can read or something they can listen to, that's fine.
My question is about your team. I was watching your presentation. She said her part. Then Haja jumped in, Shade jumped in, and when Shade jumped in, she said, she handled that part, and now here's my part. So I was curious about what was your team dynamic?
What was the question?
What was your team dynamic like? I was curious about hearing I in this whole project.
I could take that. Basically, the way our projects were structured, each of us had to take a certain part and actually handle that. And that was from instructions given by the YMP project. So my introduction was actually to give people context as far as where I fit into the whole, or where my topic fits into the whole scheme of things. And that's why I said, okay, we've set up the blog, it's appealing, we've brought in traffic, now how do we make money? So that was really just to tie everything together.
Okay. I have the mic. I have the mic.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Haja, you can say this.
You had a question for me?
Still the same question.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah, well, she answered the question pretty much. We all had our individual roles based on our skill set. I did the questionnaire because I also happen to be a member of that target market of 30 and above career women with children who could can benefit from blogs like Lapolis. So I just rounded up a few of my associates and friends, and I said, hey, what do you think of this blog? I gave my own opinion, but I won't tell it now.
My background, I'm a web developer, and I'm also into online marketing a lot. So this was the part I came in, and that was why the monetization part was something that fell under something that I did. And I guess you could speak on your qualification.
So, I mean, as far as the recommendations that I gave on social media, I have a background in social media, but I think your question about team dynamic, yeah, sure, we had challenges, of course. I think Sade spoke about that as far as scheduling conflicts and different meeting styles, but it was not as big of a challenge to kind of kill our productivity, because we each had our own strengths. We were able to work on those individually and then come together, discuss them, whether it be on the phone or in person, and bring the project together. So overall, I would say it was fine. Yeah, it's nothing different from other project team members, I'm sure.
All right. I like that you said that, but I'm not sure if that, because this is feeding into the question I'm about to not ask really, but to help every project team going forward. There's a strength that comes with the diversity of our skills. But what I find over time working with people is that as the project manager, you would have to, my lecturer used to tell me in those days that you don't have to be nice. And if you have to be nice, you don't have to be nice to a certain person. I.e., each one of us have a responsibility to be nice or not be nice. So the challenge for all project managers is to continue to look for ways of identifying those dynamics, the difference, right? And then build in inclusiveness so that at the end of the day, your deliverable will be achieved. I don't know exactly if this is what Pastor Chinwe was trying to say, but it would have been more team spirit infused team if instead of saying I, you're saying what? We.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
I will say one more thing. To our credit as a team, from the get-go, they knew we each came with strengths. And everything that we did, as far as assignments of specific jobs, from the get-go, we divided it based on our strengths. So that's to your point. Thank you. All right.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we learned a lot from that. Thanks. We learned a lot from this team. It was truly one. Okay, so congratulations on completing the program, fellows. So our last but certainly not least project is the Capital Area Food Bank. We're so excited to have them. We're so excited to have this group come forward and present their presentations. They'll actually be presenting at the food bank later this week, so we're excited to be a part of this team, this large and very capable team.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us throughout this afternoon to hear our presentation about the Capital Area Food Bank Wellness Project. My name is Kemi Tomobi.
I'm Olashade Abidoye.
I'm Amanda Chite.
And I'm Cheryl Lovell.
And our client is the Capital Area Food Bank. Next slide, please. So the Capital Area Food Bank partners with 444 organizations to deliver food to people in need. And some of those people who are impacted by the donations include daycare centers, schools, senior citizens who get certain special meals. And the biggest sources of donors include retail donors as well as food drives. Next slide, please.
As you can see, this is a photo. As you enter the Capital Area Food Bank, you will see volunteers, and right now they're just sorting all the categories or sorting donated food into the individual categories. Next slide, please. The objectives of this project, is to determine the potential nutritional value of donated food to the food bank, to make recommendations to CAF to make sure that they're communicating these nutritional values to their partners and donors, and lastly, to assist CAF in obtaining wellness foods so they can, in turn, also distribute to the community they serve. Next slide, please.
All right, in order to meet those objectives, we had a series of deliverables, and the first was to determine the sample size within each of the 27 categories that was determined by the Capital Area Food Bank, and within each of those categories, determine whether they fit the categories for wellness or non-wellness based on their own standards, and then to test the samples within each category, and then to determine quantitatively whether they've had a high probability of meeting the standards for wellness. And then finally, to develop a plan and then make suggestions on how the Capital Area Food Bank can use volunteer groups in this effort. Next slide, please.
All right, so project methodology. Our project was two-pronged. The initial stage of our project entailed our data collection and analysis. During this stage, we sorted through hundreds and thousands of canned food items, analyzing each individual food label to determine whether the food item met the wellness criteria provided to us by guidelines given to us by the food bank. If the food item met the wellness criteria, it was deemed wellness, and if it didn't meet the criteria, it was deemed non-wellness. Now, we began collecting our data on July 9th and didn't end until September 18th. All of our team members were extremely instrumental in this first stage of our project. We all met at the food bank in various shifts, ranging from 9 a.m. to noon, Monday through Saturday. Somebody was there at least 4 days out of the week collecting data. Initially, we anticipated the use of a mobile app to help us record our data, but due to a delay in the launch of the mobile app, we ended up tallying, collecting our data using tally marks on a sheet of paper. At the end of every shift, our tally marks were added up and then exported to an Excel spreadsheet for further analysis. And then stage 2 of our project was where we conducted surveillance and informational interviews at the food bank. Kemi and Sade were very instrumental. They spearheaded this portion of our project. Sade conducted observations of the volunteers at the food bank, their orientation process, how they interacted with the volunteer leads, how they learned, how they themselves sorted. And then Kemi and Sade both conducted informational interviews with some of the food bank leads to gain insight on their practices now, so we can recommend them on how they can improve their practices in the future. Next slide.
This is just a photo of the conveyor belt. We didn't participate in this section of volunteerism, but volunteers would actually look through each individual donated food item to make sure if they're damaged, if they're morphed or disconfigured, and also to see if the food is expired. Then they would now sort them into the individual categories. Next slide.
All right, so this infographic here was created by the food bank's resident dietitian. It shows the 5 essential steps that the food bank is taking to move towards tracking the wellness of their inventory. Our project aligns with step 3 of the wellness tracking process, which is where the various categories of food were sorted and they were analyzed to determine whether they met the wellness potential that lined up with the guidelines the food bank provided. We specifically were tasked with determining the wellness potential of the foods in their donated inventory. All right, so we determined the wellness of foods based on 3 wellness indicators: sugar, sodium, and fiber. And each wellness indicator was accompanied by a wellness threshold. So just to give you an example of each food item, we have ketchup here. Ketchup's wellness indicator was sodium, and its wellness threshold was less than 150 milligrams. So if any ketchup had sodium of 150 milligrams or less, it was deemed wellness. And if it had anything greater than 150 milligrams, it was deemed non-wellness. After we collected all of our data and exported everything to an Excel spreadsheet, we developed these 3 parameters and took the averages of within every wellness category to differentiate whether a category had high wellness potential, moderate wellness potential, or low wellness potential. Next slide, please. All right, so this bar graph here, this stacked bar graph, shows specifically the categories of foods that we sorted, 18 categories, and then the number of items we sorted per each category. And you can see some categories we oversorted, such as the canned beans. We sorted 3,000 units of canned beans. Each individual can had to be picked up, the label had to be analyzed. Things like that occurred because of miscommunication between us and our project sponsor. Everything in green is the amount of items within the category that was deemed wellness, so it met the wellness criteria. Everything in blue are the items that did not meet the wellness criteria. Next slide, please. All right, and then this bar graph here refers to the parameters that we spoke about earlier, deeming each category of food high wellness potential, low wellness potential, or moderate wellness potential. We recommend that the food bank focuses on educating their donors on the guidelines that they would like to see in the categories that exhibited low and moderate wellness potential. Next slide.
So I actually did interviews with CAF and other volunteer structures like the Silver Spring Library. Here I interviewed Ian from CAF, who used to be a volunteer and has now turned into a staff member. Cheryl is going to assist me in reading the questions.
Okay. How did they recruit volunteers?
They recruit volunteers by targeting youth at local universities and colleges, also by sending newsletters out. They also had the assistance of YSOP, which is the Youth Service Opportunities Project, and the Union Mission.
How did they maintain volunteers?
They maintain volunteers by asking all volunteers to set up an account where they can track them, they can schedule them, as well as follow up with them. They convert, sorry, go ahead.
How did they convert one-day volunteers to long-term volunteers?
They do this by making sure the environment is actually friendly. It's easy for them to communicate with their leads, and also make sure that they give them different settings to work in. They also have a garden at CAF, so if people prefer working outside, they can do that. They can work in the office environment. They have a lot of paperwork to sort, or they can actually do, as you saw in the other photo, interact with other volunteers if they like people.
What would you say the organization's best practices but to retain volunteers?
They send out newsletters and they do digital marketing on their social media. They also make sure that they promote the effect of volunteerism. They show how their volunteerism is affecting the community through visual aids and videos.
How would you say that how would you say that CAF improved their volunteer organizational structure?
Sorry, I actually switched it up. But they want to be able to promote volunteerism in the community, and to go back to how they maintain their volunteers. They also give us volunteer appreciation celebration, as well as send out birthday greetings to their volunteers. Next question.
Okay. What improvements can you say they can make to their best practices?
They want to broaden their reach into the communities, and they want to make sure that they increase awareness that there's a need for volunteerism. Next slide, please. As I said before, I also interviewed Mr. David Waters at Silver Spring Library just to compare and contrast the different forms of their volunteerism structures. The first two questions were very similar. They also target specific audiences, except that they do target their volunteers within the library. So if you're not volunteering or you don't go to the library normally, you wouldn't know that they're in need of volunteers at Silver Spring Library. The only difference I would say would be in question number the fourth question, asking them how do they maintain their volunteers or convert them from one day to long-term volunteers. They tend to target volunteers with their areas of need. For example, there's a couple of retired teachers. One specifically teaches vocabulary and speech improvement courses. So if you're a foreigner or if you're looking to expand your speech, there's a class available for that for free. Lastly, what they tend to do is they want to actually reduce the use of technology. To quote Mr. David Waters, he says he wants to train volunteers where technology cannot be applied to fill the gap between technology and human capabilities. He says that he wants to definitely promote, to increase or better their structure. They actually want to promote volunteerism outside of the library. As I said, they only advertise within the library. So they want to make sure that volunteers know outside of Silver Spring Library that they need volunteers and to show their impact in the community. Next slide, please.
So in addition to the interviews that we conducted with volunteers within the food bank and outside the food bank, we also interviewed the food resources team. And the role of the food resources team at the Capital Area Food Bank is to keep track of the donations, keep inventory, and they're the ones who have the first-rate knowledge of what goes on in terms of the pattern of donations, what gets given to the community, what gets wasted, and so on. So we wanted to get at how they avoided waste, how they kept track of their patterns of donations, and how they fit in with the mission of the food bank to provide healthier food to the communities. And the gist of it was that they reduced waste by using recipes and by communicating through partner education and donor education to better educate people about what is healthy food and what is not healthy food, so that they don't keep getting donations of unhealthy food only to have it go to waste. In addition, the patterns of donations throughout the year varied, with high donations during the holiday season. And during the holiday season, that was when they tend to have the highest donations of junk food, which obviously does not fit the mission of the Capital Area Food Bank. So they're trying to change their patterns of donations so that it does fit the mission of the food bank. Next slide, please. All right, we also interviewed the dietitian. So starting September 1st, they did start the ban on snacks, and so that meant they didn't accept any more soda, any more holiday candy, or any baked goods. This was even after we sorted a whole category of snacks, and believe me, most of the stuff that was in the snacks category included stuff like goldfish and fig Newtons and other cakes and other things that were not healthy. And so it was really nice to hear that even after we sorted that whole category, that certain foods were banned and did actually fit the mission of the food bank. In addition to that, we noticed that in sorting snacks that there's multiple things to look at other than sugars. When Amanda pointed out some of the categories, some of them are ranked based on sugar for wellness, and snack was ranked based on whether it had 12 grams of fat per serving. If it was higher than that, it was considered not wellness. If it was lower than that, it was considered wellness. But in reality, there's other things to consider, such as fats and salt and other things to determine whether it is wellness or not. So one of the challenges we've had is in determining how to display that information for donors and for partners so that they can make better decisions on how to pick wellness foods for their community. So that was one area that we were asking questions for. And basically, there's certainly an area of improvement for both donor and partner education. Next slide. Also, we interviewed information technology. As was mentioned earlier, we were anticipating the mobile app to launch in July to help aid with the sorting because it is a very tedious process. There are certain times when we see Pop-Tarts 10 times. We had like an app, maybe the app will just scan it or something so that it would take less time to sort through certain items. So the app did not launch. Nevertheless, we did pull through with the project, but it would have been nice to find some way to make the process more automated. And so that was where we contacted IT to find out, what are some ways, best practices. And they mentioned that keeping track of volunteers is certainly helpful. It provides them good information on how to best change things. And in addition, they do anticipate that the mobile app will one day launch, although it was not able to be launched during our watch. Next slide.
Okay, it's me, sorry. And here this is the recommendations we have. A lot of the recommendations have to do with education, and it starts with the donor partner educations. Can be done better by simply teaching how to read labels of wellness and non-wellness, considering cultural differences when putting together side dishes. Example, Hispanic or Latino families. Ensuring that volunteer leaders, CAF staff, are well educated on foods and wellness and non-wellness and is so able to communicate that to their volunteers. Providing opportunity for nutritional education in neighbors in need. Making comparison in Q2, which is the winter holidays, of donations to determine the pattern of donations from season to season. Using technology tools to collect data and store data. A scale by which you can measure nutritional information so one can assess wellness, example, sugar amounts. We'll revisit the criteria, the multiple wellness indicator, which is sugar, fats, sodium, that you found mostly in snacks, especially in snacks. And also to do a multi-volunteer recognition. Amanda. Next slide.
All right, so the food bank identified an area of need that we also identified would be an opportunity for growth for them, and it was in donor education. So this infographic was also created by the food bank. It's entitled Most Wanted Items, and it was basically created to educate donors on the items that the food bank would prefer for them to donate so they can provide healthy foods to the communities. The infographic that they created briefly alludes to the wellness indicators that the food bank wants attached to each food category. And it doesn't specifically tell you which indicator belongs to which food category. So what we recommended was maybe a reverse side with a little cheat sheet, which is what we created on this side here, a little cheat sheet to specifically link the specific food categories to not only their wellness indicators, but also to their wellness thresholds. Because someone without a background or with little knowledge about nutrition might not know if their cereal should be low or high in fiber or low in sodium. Next slide, please.
In this stage, we have challenges and experiences. So we're going to deal with challenges first. Sorting process was late because of some of the categories that were overrepresented and some that were underrepresented. Some categories were not clearly defined, making it difficult to sort them. K-loads, which are crates versus boxes. Checking chaos could be made easier to navigate. Loss of 2 team members during the project. The cancellation of the mobile app was a big hazard for us. The 2 supply that we were supplied with, we had a hard time finding them sometimes, and it was also hazardous in some areas. Challenges with availability of shift schedules. We had a problem with schedules, sorry. And next slide, please. And our experiences. The CAF tour was enjoyable. Staff at the front counter was welcoming and knowledgeable. Livia, our volunteer liaison for CAF staff, was extremely helpful, and she was just awesome. The checkout process was smooth and made simple. Gained a lot of knowledge and respect for the process of feeding people. The privilege to be part of this process was really something we enjoyed and really just made us feel really good about doing it. Thank you. Questions?
Questions.
So overall, I think we can all agree that this was a really fulfilling experience working at the food bank. We were all challenged to step outside of ourselves and our busy schedules and come together for a greater cause. You too can be a part of this great cause by speaking up and advocating about issues about hunger and poverty in the community. You can volunteer your services like we did. Sign up for the food bank's newsletters and keep up to date with all of the things that they have going on in the community. So just throwing that out there, if you want any information, you can definitely touch bases with one of us after the presentation.
And just to add, one of the things that really we gained more than anything else from doing this process, actually going through the process of seeing what they do at this food bank, it is so huge. It's immense of what they do and how much they do and how much people they feed on a daily basis. But one of the beautiful things is that each and every one of our eyes were open to the wellness of food and the non-wellness and the amount of sodium there is in food and sugar in food. It makes you aware of what you're eating. It also makes you aware of what you're donating, which is more important. Just because somebody doesn't have doesn't mean that they don't have to have quality food donated to them. So that's something for you to think about. So.
Okay, we want to thank the team so much. We're going to leave it open for some question and answers. I'll just pass this mic open.
Thanks. Really great presentation, very good eye-opener. I just had a question. I was a little bit unclear about what the purpose of the volunteer aspect was. I got that the goal of the project was to look at the wellness and non-wellness of foods. I didn't quite understand the focus on the volunteer program. So if you could help me maybe understand a little bit better what the purpose for that was.
Well, the volunteers are actually instrumental because if they don't have the volunteers, they're not able to sort out any of the food. So we want to make sure that they're catering to the volunteers that they have, that they're identifying the audience that they should be targeting, which is the youth, which we didn't have any problem with that because they're very strong and they can endure a lot. So we want to make sure that they're communicating to the volunteers that they have when you're sorting out food, what you should be looking for, and making sure that their volunteers are also happy. Because if they leave, they really don't have anyone to help them sort the food or help distribute. So we wanted to make sure that they paid attention to that and to see where they can improve so their structure can continue moving on. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, so there are one-day volunteers, there are one-week volunteers. Most of us were like 4-month volunteers, and there are some who would stay on longer. And one of the people she interviewed was someone who started as a volunteer but ended up becoming a paid staff. And so when someone volunteers their time and they're not getting credit or not getting paid for it, people can easily lose morale. You know, people continue to need motivation. People continue to need to know the vision of why they're doing what they're doing. And so having volunteer recognition and having incentives for volunteers and keeping track of volunteer hours in a nonprofit organization is really crucial. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think I know what you're saying. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. If you notice one of the pictures we had those tall stacks of food that are in one of the pictures where they had a lot of food and shelves and people sorting. The mission people come in and they volunteer, and they have groups like from Bank of America, MGM, Motors, a whole lot of different organizations. They take their companies and they go there on a day to sort. Parents bring their children during the summertime, schools sometimes volunteer. And the purpose behind it is that they're sorting tons of food. And in sorting the process, they're sorting, it's because they have, is it partners who distribute the food. So as they sort, as the volunteers sort and put it together,
No, understood. I'm sorry. My question is that I think that the volunteer program is very critical. I'm asking that it seemed like maybe your project had two different scopes. I just wanted to clarify. Right. So I wanted to clarify if that was from the client or if that was something that you guys were interested in yourselves, because it seemed like there were two purposes.
Well,
So-
if I could, as Amanda mentioned, there's actually 3 different steps, actually 5 different steps for the entire food bank process. They worked on one step. And so to get to step 4 and step 5, the food bank itself will have to mobilize a group of volunteers. And so the second part of this project was really about, after the lovely ladies in their work, how is the food bank going to mobilize volunteers to continue this work in wellness delivery? Because the essential problem is, how do we unlock the wellness potential of the food banks? If they don't honestly know what they have, and they don't honestly know the quality of the food that they are delivering, they're not going to be as effective as they could be. And so this was one element of it, but for the other elements of it, they need to also mobilize a group of volunteers. And so really the second part of the project was really about, how do we continue that work with another group of volunteers? How do we mobilize them, and how do we get them engaged?
It wasn't clear from the beginning. I think that's why she asked the question. It's because when we started listening, we thought we were listening to what they did at the food bank. But because they mentioned the volunteers, I see why she asked the question. Was that part of the focus? And then if it's not, why is it being talked about? And then if it was an interest you developed while you were working there, then it wasn't clear. That's what it is. But it was a vital part of what you did, because I was listening because I'm in charge of volunteers here, so I was just grabbing information. But the truth is that we didn't understand why it suddenly jumped into the picture.
I think because we were focusing on volunteer education. I think that's why the volunteers came in place heavily, because you don't want people to volunteer. Part of the recommendation for the food bank is that they focus on education. And as I say, education is label reading and understanding the wellness and non-wellness of food. So we wanted the volunteers to also understand what they're sorting and how they're sorting it, because in the process, so that's where the volunteer piece came into, and also the recognition for what they did.
I think the point still that she's trying to bring out is the clarity in the presentation, so that we understood that right from the beginning, that we went in to do this, but we also did this. Exactly. So that was the only thing that we feel is missing, but it was good.
The disconnect might have happened when we discussed the stages. So stage 1 was data collection and analysis, and then stage 2 is when we conducted our observations at the food bank. We were observing the volunteers, and we also conducted our interviews with the volunteer leads. What we wanted to focus on was volunteer retention, so having volunteers with that knowledge who are able to keep this process going after we're gone, as opposed to short-term volunteers who, after they're gone, then they have to start over and train another group of people. So maybe recognition was one of our recommendations, to keep those volunteers in place. And then another thing was the education portion, where you train these people so they can train the next person and the next person, and having it to be an efficient process. When we sorted, there were a lot of times where we'd find cans that didn't belong in pre-sorted categories. So the education piece on the back end, would also educating these volunteers would also help the process that we were going to be more efficient. If they knew exactly why they were sorting, what they were sorting, as opposed to, I'm just getting my volunteer hours for high school.
Yeah, just to add to that, in the section of the objectives, it is the last objective to assist CAP in making sure that when they obtain it, they also distribute it to the community. So the volunteers are within that actual objective. They're part of that essential objective of our project. I should have mentioned the word volunteers, maybe that would have been helpful. But yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, it was next year's deliverables. It was our 5th deliverable. We said specifically we're going to develop a plan to engage volunteer groups in terms of furthering the objectives of the wellness project. So maybe if that wasn't made clear, we could try to work better to make that have more clarity.
All right, yeah, so, okay, so I'm actually happy about this because through the decluttering process, we actually recommend that people donate the food that they have sort of cleared out of their pantry to Capital Area Food Bank is one of the biggest that we recommend. So it's sort of interesting now that they're sort of deciding what to take in and what not to take in. Junk food is now banned. That's very good information for me. So now you guys have gone through the process of taking these foods, classifying it for wellness or not. What exactly are you guys training the volunteers to identify? Are you just training them to be able to sort out these foods? And in distribution of these foods, like what is the main goal? Is the main goal to make sure that maybe they distribute healthier foods to daycares, or like what is the overall objective of educating the volunteers and actually delivering it to the community in the area of wellness?
I'll take one part of that. One of the things we really realize is that in donating food, we need to educate people on the wellness of food. So it also helps you when you're doing your own shopping and doing your own groceries. So part of the education piece comes into where you're educating people on label reading, because people don't read labels and they don't understand the labels they're reading, and they don't realize the highness and the content of some of the sodium and sugars and over excess of things that they're there. So part of the education, one part of it is to make sure that people understand how to eat it, making sure that the food bank is in recognition that, okay, some of these foods you know don't need to be donating because it's just like snacks. It's not healthy, it doesn't work, so that they can look at that. So in education, you have donors, you have partners who donate, who are distributing foods, to educate them on what kind of foods. A donor, if I'm standing before the church and saying, okay, we're going to do this donation program and we're donating foods to the food bank, I want to be able to tell the church, listen, this is the wellness, this is non-wellness. We don't want to donate foods that are falling too low into the non-wellness. You know, we want to have more wellness foods.
So you guys are creating guidelines that the Capital Area Food Bank can distribute to the donors, but also guidelines that they could distribute to the consumers of their products, so that they also are educated.
Exactly. So overall, what the food bank's goal is to distribute healthy food into the community and to educate people on what makes the food healthy, why it's healthy. So they're not only educating their donors, but they're educating their partners too. I'm going to educate my donors so they donate healthy food to me. I'm going to educate my partners so they request healthy foods from me. So everyone who's distributing food into the community is distributing healthy foods. Apparently the target population, the people who need the services of the food bank and other food banks in the area, their communities suffer from non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and high blood pressure and other gastrointestinal issues. So by distributing these healthy foods, the food bank is overall trying to give people a better quality of life.
So you guys work with the dietitian and everyone to develop.
Yes. And you also have to look at, I really firmly believe, and we discussed it at one point in time as a team, that as consumers, if we're not buying certain foods because they're not falling into that wellness category, they got to do something to change it. So we have to force change. We have to be part of change. We have to make a difference in that aspect of it. So if I'm looking at a can of beans and realizing it's 350 milligrams of sodium, and it's not healthy because it's 500. Some of these sodium levels were off the charts. So you kind of force them. I know they need to do things to preserve, but there got to be another way to do it, and we have to force them to do that. So it's also about making choices as a consumer and making changes. And as Amanda said, Justice Facility, they do boxes for senior citizens. Some of these foods are not healthy.
All right. Well done. Two things. I need to provide clarity in terms of project process and key milestones that would help in understanding. Because I have the presentation here, and I was really trying to figure out, for example, what was the scope of the project before she explained it because of the question that was raised. So for clarity, my recommendation would be the overall scope of the project, then key processes or key processes that would lead to your deliverables. And each of those processes has a key milestone. Underneath each key milestone, there is a deliverable. Because I'm sure that if we had the overall scope broken down into the 5 stages you mentioned, somewhere around there, maybe the volunteer part of it would have come out. This is for clarity, because anybody who picks up this document should be able to just say, oh, I understand what this is clearly, because it's not all the time you have an opportunity to have such a beautiful, add their voice to the paperwork. The other part of it is, I'm not sure also there was, in order to even find out if the methodology that this organization is using is working, or they can partner or syndicate, because it's a huge organization. They can syndicate some of these things to other food banks, or part of the process to other food banks that can help them. I'm not sure if you did some form of audit of 2, 3 other organizations who do similar things, maybe not as huge as this. What that would provide, especially in the Maryland area, I mean, I've volunteered for 2 other organizations on a similar situation. It will also help us to understand where they can actually pull their strength from. The truth is, for every single nonprofit organization, volunteers are the ones who make it happen. They are the ones who make the difference, so that they are very key to it. So it's not just training them per se, but also understanding that they are the life wire of the organization. But if they work with other nonprofit organizations who do similar things, then maybe the resources in this can be shifted to the other organizations. No, I don't know who is Amanda. I'm talking about the 3 of you. Sorry, darling.
No, it's fine.
She had to clarify that because of the question my sister raised. And that became clearer to me what it was that you guys are trying to achieve. But listening and just looking at this, it didn't give me that overall understanding of what, so that I can then say, okay, the deliverable addressed the challenge. But if you break it down into phases or processes or key milestones, each one would have a deliverable, of which I believe, if you break it down like that, this volunteer issue would have been clearly addressed.
We definitely appreciate that feedback, and we'll make our changes before we present to our sponsor later this week.
The only comment I was just going to make is very similar to what Pastor Collett said, and I'm particularly concerned about the presentation you're going to make to the food bank at the end of the week. What I would suggest are 2 things. The first thing I would say is you might want to streamline the language that is used to explain the objectives and the deliverable. It's a lot of words, and people don't have the ability to grasp that many words at once. So I would say streamline the words that you use in the actual paper. Now, when you're talking, you can go into more meat of it, or so to say, but on paper, I would say streamline the words you use.